All right, we're here up in Harlem. Great to be back up here in one of the hottest locations, Red Rooster, down in a speakeasy. We'll get to that later. But more importantly is the guest that I have to my left, John Henry. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm good, man.
Good to see you.
Thanks for
How's
having
everything?
me.
Nah, thank you.
Good to meet
Always
you.
good to meet you as well.
It's fun with the Instagram world is you get to know people before you get to meet them.
Yeah, exactly. You
right?
just start trolling and find out who they are.
Totally. So we have context on each other.
Exactly.
So it's good.
It's like, send me some stuff. Oh yeah, okay, now I know this guy. Yeah.
Right. It's good to have you up here, man, in my hometown.
No, that's great. So were you born and raised up here?
I'm born and raised uptown.
Okay.
So in the neighborhood just above called Washington Heights. But for me, my hometown is uptown. I've lived in Harlem, Washington Heights, the Bronx. Anything kind of north of 96th Street is my domain.
That's where it's your sweet spot.
These are my streets.
You got it down.
Yeah.
What is it like growing up here? I mean, because I remember when I lived, over 10 years ago in New York City, it was completely different than it is now.
Yeah.
It's ever evolving. You know, there's new hotspots, great restaurants. So it's like Red Rooster where we're at right now.
Totally. Yeah. I mean,
real estate's hot, like everything.
Everything's hot. I mean, growing up here in the early 90s was a different story. But people paint it with broad strokes and say, it was it's easy to just dismiss it as though our neighborhoods were undesirable then. Yeah. I think even though they might have been considered more dangerous, it's also where I felt the most love. Yeah. It's also
real.
Yeah, nostalgia. That's where my mom sold super soakers in the parks and during the summers, and my pops, drove gypsy cabs and did whatever they could to help us get by. Those were my earliest memories. That's my DNA.
Yeah. So that's what makes you.
Yeah, totally.
That's the framework that is John Henry.
That's right.
So it seems as though at a young age, seeing as you're referencing super soakers, gypsy cabs already, but then the first 2 minutes, there must be an entrepreneur bug or within your DNA as well.
Yeah, maybe. I think what the bug or the DNA, I think what it was is, having that immigrant experience has forever been formative to my upbringing because it shapes who you are, how you move, what you do, and how you look at things. Most importantly, you learn. That's right, the frame. You learn to make a lot out of a little. Yeah. In any situation, and my folks, despite having little side hustles, mostly work jobs. Right. But it was that mindset of, hey, take what you got and flip it into something bigger. Yeah. That flip is what I fell in love with. Yeah. And so, the hustle. I got started on it early on. So
did you jump into entrepreneurship, at a young age, start working or hustling or working in different areas?
Well, yeah, I did a bunch of stuff. My first life was as a musician. Okay. I played jazz for a long time. And I don't mean casually. I played 8 hours a day.
Oh, wow.
Every day.
You were all in.
Yeah, man. Till my fingers bled. And then I put super glue on them. And then I'll play some more. And that was my thing. And my family actually moved to Florida for a little while after 9/11. They were just like, dude, this city life is crazy. Let's go raise our kids somewhere else. And so after high school, I moved back. And I moved back, young adult, stepping back into the city that made me. And I was like, all right, cool. Let's do this. Let's see what we can get done. Right. And, I wanted it to be as a jazz musician. Yeah. That path didn't end up working out for me. But it opened all kinds of other doors. So that was kind of the homecoming back to the city. And it sounds like you lived here for a little while.
Yeah. I lived here as well.
This city, where do you live?
Energy. I live in Vegas now.
You live in Vegas. So
it's a different world.
Totally different. And I don't know what you ended up taken away out of New York, but for me, it's if there's any place where you can start from scratch and turn it into something, it's right here.
Yeah, I mean, when I looked at New York, it's the same thing. You walk in, it's kind of the energy, the hustle, and you're surrounded by people that are constantly trying to do or achieve something, and aspiring to be bigger than wherever they are in their lives at that time. And people, I think when you come to New York City, you take a little bit of that.
Ooh, we have some cocktails. A little cocktail break.
Yeah. This cocktail break is brought to you by India.
Wow, great.
These look great. Cheers.
Shout out to the Rooster.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's on point.
Nice unit.
Some summer action. Yeah.
That summer swagoo. Yeah, but I mean, you know, when you look at New York City, it's kind of, you kind of get a little delusional because everyone, you feel as though you can do anything and achieve anything and nothing, you know, and I think that when people come here, you get just kind of punched in the mouth and you're like, whoa. I got to get on my game.
Totally.
You know,
and I love that delusion. And that's kind of how I came back into the game here. And I started working a bunch of dead end jobs and I got a job as a doorman. And that's where I say, opening up doors for people, open up doors for me. Yeah, literally physically open up doors in a cheap suit, smiling, saying, hello, nice to meet you.
Yeah.
That was it, man. And like, dude, that's all I fucking needed.
Yeah.
That was it.
So you came here with like nothing, no job. So you just got into being a doorman.
That's it. That's it.
Trying to make ends meet.
That's right. And my family, you know, is a pretty poor family. And so I came and it was like me and my brother and my pops, and we were just trying to do what we could. And for me, I was like, all right, cool. I get a gig in a suit under AC. Yeah. Like, all right, you know, that's already a blessing.
Not that bad. Yeah, it's not that bad.
But then I started realizing that the real currency wasn't the hourly wage that I was making. It was the people that I was meeting.
The interaction, the relationships you were building.
And this is the informational capital, the human capital that's concentrated here in New York.
Yeah.
In this 13 by 3 mile island. And it's only 3 miles wide at its widest point on 14th Street. I love New York.
Yeah.
Like that, this is the energy. The fact that we can have all this talent here, you know, and you can come in, you be visiting, you hit me up yesterday, yo, can you shoot? I hit up my boys, the restaurateur, and boom, we made it happen.
And all of a sudden we're here.
Like, it's amazing. Yeah. So that's what I fell in love with. And through that, persistently meeting folks and being interested in what they were doing, I got an opportunity to start my first business. There was a guy who had a franchise of dry cleaners, and he said, hey, I can't offer you much, but I can offer you, you know, access to my facility. Go and convince whomever to give you their clothes, bring them to me. I'll clean them for cheap. You charge the market rate and you make the spread.
Yeah.
So I was just a middleman business.
Right.
So that's how I started, going to other doormen, convincing them, and then
basically
eventually
doing like biz dev for them, and then
totally,
but taking a spread.
I ended up creeping into the film and the TV industry. So we did all the wardrobe for Boardwalk Empire, Law and Order. And all
so how do you just creep into the film? That doesn't just happen.
So I was getting ready to quit my job.
Maybe now it would, but now
it would. Yeah. Ding, personal brand. I was getting ready to quit my job. I was telling all my favorite residents, yo, I'm getting ready to do this thing on the low. And one of the residents was like, yo, I've been doing this shit I've been in the film and TV industry for like 25 years. And we have yet to find a single dry cleaner that would be willing to pick up our stuff at like 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning.
Oh, when they're after filming and everything. You're like,
guy,
I got you.
I got you.
Yeah,
my guy.
Me. Got your guy.
And so he picked me up that night. He's like, yo, what time you get off? I said 11 on the dot. He picked me up. He took me on to the set of what became my first film account, which was The Wolf of Wall Street. Crazy long story short, I didn't get the account for months. I actually got fired from my job because I was trying to convert, you know, residents into customers.
Yeah, they didn't like that.
But I did end up getting a call from Wolf of Wall Street. We did a great job. I actually took all the garments, instead of taking them to my mentor, respectfully, I took them to my pops, who was a presser.
Oh, wow.
Fucking banging it out of the park. Then we got Boardwalk Empire. Then we got Law and Order, Person of Interest, White Collar, Amazing Spider-Man 2, Ninja Turtles, and it just kind of kept going from there.
On and on and on.
And I haven't looked back, man.
So do you still have that business now?
No, I flipped that business. I sold it. I didn't love it. You know?
Yeah, but it's a means to an end. I mean,
Totally.
everything. Sometimes you have to do shit you don't want to do in order to get where, you know, open the doors to be able to do what you really want to do.
Totally. And I didn't have this false expectation that I needed to change the world with my first business.
Right.
If you ask me now, I'm trying to change the world. But if you ask me then, you know, I'm trying to get by. I'm trying to, like, you know, create a framework by which I can make a living on my own terms.
Right.
And that was enough for me.
That's where I think, you know, people today are a little bit disillusioned in that they think they have to change the world and hit a home run today. And if they don't, they're not successful because they see all this stuff on the internet and they're like, well, that guy did it and he's 21. So now I'm behind the 8 ball. And it's like, well, we all know 90% of those guys or people are frauds, like bullshit. Like they're not. It's just what they put out there. But the other side of it is that you build, you know, and you build momentum off of that, and that opens another door. Then that one opens another 2 doors. Then you flip that, and now you have a little bit of cash to maybe invest in another type of business.
Dude, I wish I would have heard that exact nugget like 8 years ago when I first started. because I place this pressure on myself.
Yeah, it's
and I
self-induced.
see a lot of first-time founders place this pressure that you have to learn everything you're meant to learn out of your first business.
Yeah,
and now I see it's just not the case.
Yeah.
Like when I look back on my first business, what I learned was like the ability to like speak to people and start cold and sell a little bit. And, you know, I didn't know how to raise capital. I didn't know anything about any of this stuff that I know now. But to your point, after that first win, then I stepped into building an incubator and I started learning a little bit more, you know, macro. Now I run a fund, you know, and so to your point, I'm just building now.
And now the access point.
Yeah,
But
there's no finish line.
You just got a pretty huge investment from
yes, we
TPG.
Did. Yes, we did.
Harlem Capital.
Shout out TPG. Thank you guys.
No, but that's huge. I mean, that just shows you. Now you're exposed. You built the fund. You guys started the fund, which we can talk about in a second. But then now you've opened the door into one of the largest private equity companies in the world.
That's right. So, and for probably a lot of people won't have context on TPG. I certainly didn't before I got in this world, but just a massive firm that controls 100 billion plus in assets under management. I mean, they're just managing money. And as I've grown, I've realized like I've grown beyond this. Like I got into the game through startups, right? Like, you know, Uber for X or like Tinder for Y. Yeah. And then you see, okay, you know, business is more macro than that. Right. It interacts with policy. It interacts with trade. It interacts with, you know, all kinds of things.
Everything's intertwined within the world and the global economy. And people just, you know, you get so focused within your little area in your own little trench. And there's a whole world that's intertwined together that, you know, that's where I think that sometimes till you put yourself out there, you don't even realize, you know, how large the world is and what's really going on.
Totally.
Like, how does trade impact me? You're like, oh, it doesn't matter to me. I'm just sitting here doing it. It's like, it will when the cost of your goods that you're trying to build or, you know, sell go up 2, 3, 4 times. That's going to change your margins.
Absolutely.
You know, real quick.
So I started like developing my understanding, and that's what I'm taking joy in now is just like learning, you know, these macro themes and then turning around and seeing how that applies in the micro. Right. And I am also self-aware enough to understand we're living in a very pivotal generation. So there is a blessing. The guys like you and I, we can bridge the two. Right. You know, and so I think about every day, I'm like, man, what is lost in translation that we can, you know, build value out of? Where can we go and pull something out of the macro and bring it to the micro or vice versa?
So what would you say is one of the most prevalent examples? You know,
I mean, one of them that is like, you know, my day to day is like, you know, there's a huge amount of pressure for corporates to go diverse now. And, you know, it's like, we just are realizing that everything's run by like just, you know, pretty much the same, you know, homogenous group. And not that I think the only thing wrong with that is that resources and opportunity hasn't equally tapped, you know, different segments of the population. Right. So that's an example, right? When these corporates face downward pressure on the macro, they then look to the playing field and they say, okay, great. Who is out there that can meet our needs? Yeah. And so for anyone like who's out there, a practitioner, you know, you can align yourself with that and capture some value, right? So there's one, I mean, there's so many. Media is another one. And, you know, honestly, Gary's the one who put me onto all this stuff. Probably a lot of folks, but like this whole shift where you don't have to wait for someone to tell your story, you can write your own. Yeah. Once that clicked for me, I was like,
it's
I got you. Yeah. All right, cool.
You don't need permission to tell your story.
You know, it just takes reps, like reps. Yeah. And if I look back at my first vlogs, I actually cringe watching them. I was like, oh God, it's so bad. And now I looked at my most recent one. I was like, all right, not too bad.
now you're on TV, so it's
so, a little bit different.
I think you're a little bit more polished than you were on your first one.
Facts. But go and look at that, right? It's like, I love the art of the flip, right? Like, I'm on TV now. Someone who discovers me through Vice, shout out Viceland, might think like, oh, cool. But like, if you flip before that, it was a podcast. And you flip all the way.
It's the iterations with like, of everything.
You know, an iPhone. Yeah. So I'm, you know, like energized by that.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. You know, kind of just closing the loop with, you know, kind of the lessons that are learned and how to tie them together. I think now more than ever, you know, there's a space for people to help translate what is not taught in school or even universities. And you're seeing to the diversity component that you referenced, you have these huge corporations, funds like a TPG, who maybe 10 years ago would never look at a small niche VC incubator, out of Harlem.
Definitely not.
It's like, it's not going to happen.
Right.
And you see, I know as for myself working, we sold a company to the Carlyle Group. It was never small town boy, raised by entrepreneur, lost everything, came back like self-made,
right.
ever getting in the door with a Carlyle or a Blackstone or any of these people. And now the doors are open. You're meeting with them. They're asking your opinion on what's going on, which markets, what's hot, like where should we invest our money? And
right.
I think that speaks to kind of the walls are breaking down around the world, and,
totally.
and the barriers to entry are truly going away. And we're fortunate and blessed to be in a world right now where the world is our oyster, literally. And it's not even a bunch of bullshit. It truly is. And you can get in and access anybody you want, can DM anybody that's there. Maybe they won't respond, but a lot will.
Yeah. Do you remember the first time that your mind was blown when someone that like you looked up to or you thought was really macro asked you for your advice on something?
Yeah, you're like, whoa. Hold on.
Do you actually remember?
No, I definitely do.
Tell me, what was that?
So back when I had, I used to be back in mortgages, real estate, that sort of thing. And I remember when student came to me and was kind of like, hey, I'm looking to get into the mortgage game. Like, what do? I feel lost within my career. And he was delivering pizzas at the time. And so you go and you bring him in, and kind of show him that there's a whole, I'm like, but you're a hustler. Like, what are you doing? He's like, no. Like, I didn't graduate from school. I didn't have access to, finance. I don't understand it. And you're like, son, like, come on in. Like, you gotta, and you go and you bring him in, kind of shepherd them in, teach them, the game, how to do it, training, those sort of things. They end up going from making, $25,000 a year to $300,000+ a year. It's more money than they've ever seen.
Huge.
And these are people who are not traditionally educated, you know? And so that's kind of something where I think my takeaway to answer your question is sometimes we all grow up in our bubble and we're told what we're supposed to be and where we're supposed to go and what the limitations are. There's the inherent ceiling that exists. And we're not supposed to be in with private equity companies like that. We're not supposed to be making these, tens of thousands, $100,000s of dollars. We're not supposed to know about finance. That's like this segment's game, all of those sort of things. And where you start to just break down these stereotypes.
The lines are blurred, man.
Yeah. And it's something that's incredibly empowering.
You can make a career out of blurring these lines.
Yeah.
And I quite love this crossover. It's like if you can develop mastery around different disciplines and you can fuse them, that's a whole lane in and of itself that you created for yourself. And so becoming proficient and putting in the time to get your chops up in several disciplines. Right. I think that's the game right now. Yeah. And I'm wanting to develop
and you could do it online. You can do an experience. You can go to meetups. You can ping somebody like, hey, can we get together, watch videos, content? I mean,
and the hack for me of getting into like a new industry is always learning the lingo.
The acronyms,
always the lingo.
We were just
that's always the key.
Yeah,
like
the lingo.
Like when I crossed into finance and I didn't know what the fuck these guys were saying because they were like IRR, MOIC.
We're gonna recap. Like, we're gonna do that.
I went home. I just googled the top things. IRR. And the very next time I was like, how's your IRR, your MOIC?
Well, and the MOIC. Like, that's a dirty game.
There's certain ties that you wear. Like there's certain
carry.
Carry.
Yeah, you better know carry.
Alpha. Like there's certain intangibles and soft qualities in every industry. Yeah. And you got to know your shit, but first you got to, that's the quickest hack. If you're looking to get in the industry, just like learn
the buzzwords,
the jargon.
But I mean, it does help to just go back and understand the concepts of the whole so that you then become proficient. It helps
when you know what the hell you're talking about. At the very least, know the words.
At least know the words before you go ask guidance from an expert. I get it. I totally get it. So now you just received a capital infusion from TPG.
Yes.
What's kind of the interest around Harlem Capital? What was the premise behind starting it?
Yeah.
What do you?
Yeah. So to offer context, it was me and just a few homies whom we all wanted to put a little bit of money to work for different reasons. My partners came from kind of banking era and they figured, all right, we're putting other people's money to work. Might as well put ours to work. I'm coming from like a startup background. I was like, hey, I'm incubating a lot of cool companies. I might as well might as well invest in some of these companies. Anyway, so we invest in a bunch of different things. We have a cafe here nearby. We have a dental practice. We put some money into some startups. We put money into some real estate. We quickly saw, all right, there's like venture is where we can potentially make the most impact. And I mean, we know the stats, like less than 3% of all venture funding goes to women and minorities combined, and minorities, yet we make up 70% of the US population.
Wow.
Right. But here's the crazy shit. When you peel the curtains back, there's an even fewer percentage of diverse fund managers. In other words, the folks who are the gatekeepers of the capital. Right. And so I always make a point to clarify, I firmly do not believe that there is some like ill-intentioned like circle of people who are like, laughing to themselves and keep money. I really don't believe it's that.
I agree with you.
I think it's more subconscious bias.
Yeah.
It's like you roll with whom you know.
Yeah. Like you're not exposed to it. There's inherent risk.
You invest in who you know. Exactly. And like, I don't know about you guys, but like if someone comes up to me and is like, yo, I got a spot to speak on a panel, we're paying $5,000. I'm going to put my boys on. Yeah. I'm going to put my homies on. Yeah. And the thing that happens though is like, it's a little bit different when your hookup is, I got a panel for you versus, I got a $10 million check.
I got a $10 million check. Right. all we need is a small capital infusion, $10 million.
Totally.
You don't know me from anyone. I don't have a deck. I don't have anything. I don't know what to do. Yeah.
And that happens. And so that's the opportunity, the problem that we spotted, and we became really passionate about sitting in that seat. And so to offer context about the roadmap, it was us investing really small checks to start.
Right.
Like I would put together like $2,000 or $3,000, and so would my partners, and we would come and invest in a company with $15,000 total, let's say. Yeah. So startups are looking at us like, you kidding me?
Yeah, what are you doing?
But we treated $15,000 like it was $15 million.
Yeah, so I think that's a huge difference.
You have to treat step one with as much respect as the end goal.
So as you start to make it, or you have a huge capital investment from like the TPG stuff, do you start to lose that a little bit?
No, not at all. And it's the only reason we were able to attract that kind of capital. We made a number of small bets with our own cash, and like, guys, we weren't swimming in dough here. Yeah. Like the moment people hear investor, they're like, oh, he's fucking rich.
Yeah,
like, no. I assure you,
got to deploy that
went
capital.
without, like we sacrificed a lot of, silly stuff to be able to put up a little bit of bread. And it was through putting these reps in and treating, $15,000 like it's $15 million, processes, diligence, research.
So there's guaranteed you had to fuck up. Like,
totally.
What's like the biggest fucked up?
The cafe that we invested in, I just walked past, it's fucking closed now. So RIP Harlem Coffee. But also we invested in a hemp business that it's a little technical, but the alcohol industry is like regulated, so you can't be completely vertically integrated. Like you can't distribute, create, like you can't do all that shit. And so we just kind of assumed that, the weed business would be the same. And then Trump got in office and was like, did away with that. And so that product, there was no longer a need for. And so that was done away with. Is there like a common theme? Like, like somebody, I'm looking to invest, or people like maybe, hey, I just got a $15,000, bonus, or I did this, or I saved up $15,000, and now, hey, I want to go put my money to work. I'm not very entrepreneurial, but my buddies are all calling me, because we all have friends like starting my own clothing company. I got a bar. I've got this. I've got that. Like, what are the mistakes that you made going into those businesses? But the businesses fail. That's just inherently what happens. That's life. Like, and no matter how good you are, you can't bat 1,000. I think one thing to clarify is like, guys, like startup investing is just the most fun way to lose money. Like you're gonna lose bread. Yeah. And so like, if you have just, $15,000 saved up, like this is not the sport that you should be playing.
Right.
I think that's one thing that helped me too, is understanding different asset classes and how they behave. And like now, if I was down on just my like last $10,000, I would put it in maybe some real estate, something safer.
Right.
Unless like you have an expertise, like the Vayner Talent Gang, they have an expertise in media.
Right.
If they had pulled together some 10, $15,000, I would highly encourage them to over index on what they're really good at and put money into something that they understand and can add disproportionate value, because they can bring that startup to VaynerMedia and be like, yo, I got you a big ass account.
Yeah.
And like, so you see what I'm saying? Like,
100%.
You look for opportunities where it's like 1 + 1 = 11.
Right.
You know, like where can you add outsized value?
Right.
And that to us is just startups, because I feel like that's what I grew up in. You know, this is unique to our era.
Well, you know, because you had an incubator as well, right?
Yep, I had an incubator.
In which the thing that I respect is that you had the incubator and you didn't take equity positions, which, I mean, it's very few and far between, because normally it's like, yeah, I'm going to give you my time and my guidance and, you know, spit my knowledge.
Yeah, and I'll take 6%.
I'll take 6% or 20 or 10. Like some of them get pretty egregious. But I mean, I think that one, that speaks a lot to your character. Also, your willingness to just give back and make everyone better around you. But what's kind of the
so to set the stage here, before we started the fund, I started an incubator in Harlem. It's the first incubator here. It's called Cofound Harlem. And to your point, it was a 9-month program, and we didn't take any equity. We just asked that you stay in Harlem for 2 years after the program. Fun fact to tie this in. D-Rock, Andy Kranak, and Alex DeSimone came to the incubator some 4 or 5 years ago and taught like a little like mastermind content strategy session way back when. Blew my fucking mind. Kranak was like, he was giving me all the details on Pinterest and why you should run ads there, like all that stuff. But to your point, I didn't inherently see the value in taking equity in these startups that were fledgling anyway. I preferred, like, the value of narrative to me was a lot more compelling than trying to make a buck off of a startup. Right. So much so to the point where 5 years later, we're sitting down conversing, and that's what you bring up. Like, yo, you didn't take an equity position. That's notable. Talk about that. Yeah. And I think intrinsically I understood a lot more now, but intrinsically then I understood that.
But I think for you, the value ends up coming. Like if you look back at all those businesses that come through, I mean, you're getting a master's degree on startups that are coming through, like how they're different temperaments.
Totally.
Businesses that popped, others that didn't. The need to support the community around you, constantly giving back. What does that do for you? Like sometimes you do shit just because it feels good and you feel better about yourself. And you know, when you wake up in the morning and you're like, somebody's like, hey, asshole, you're like, you know what? I know I'm not an asshole.
Right.
Like, screw you.
I run a not-for-profit.
Exactly. Therefore, you know, it's like,
no, but to that point, I think that's an interesting point. And like, I didn't make any money on that business. And people would ask me like, yo, John, how are you going to make money off this? And like, if you're a good, you know, salesman, you eventually start buying your own shit. And I'd be like, oh, there's no shortage of ways to make money. And then came a time where I really needed to make money. And I was like, damn, what am I going to do? And to that point earlier where you don't need every one business to teach you everything. Cofound Harlem taught me brand. It was the first time I actually was on the map. I never got on the map because I ran a dry cleaner. I got on the map because I did this really interesting media project, and I learned how to create and extract value in adjacent businesses. So I didn't have to monetize the incubator. And that's when I started discovering, wow, you can get paid. I hosted a podcast for Gimlet Media. I didn't know you could get paid for why. I was like, dude, they were producing it for eBay. And I was like, why would eBay pay me to then distribute me to their millions of listeners? That was a light bulb moment when I understood experientially.
But do you is that the world today? I mean, is that how you see it?
That's the world today. The world today is if you have a unique enough viewpoint, someone will find value in collaborating with you and paying you like eventually you build enough cool that they just want to be in bed with you just because you're cool. But before then, if you just have a really cool viewpoint, then people will pay you to jump on their project. And that changed everything for me when I understood kind of, that was my first interaction with the branded media world. And since then I've done a few go arounds. For instance, Viceland, Cadillac.
There we go.
Like, and I'm really starting to think that the future of media, I think media is moving away from monetizing via ads. And I think it's moving towards branded collaborations.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you reference that. A couple of my buddies are the co-founders of Menlo Club 5-4. And we were together last week in LA, and it was kind of these brand collaborations now that you're seeing. You have the hotel world are collaborating with fashion. Fashion's collaborating with, not just influencers, but businessmen. You see what Gary Vee's doing with K-Swiss. I mean, it's all of this stuff to where there's more culturally relevant people and things to collaborate with. Cadillac's making a huge push to be more culturally relevant.
Yep.
Because traditionally, I remember my pops had a Cadillac, and we'd go around, and that was like the car, the Cadillac.
Yep.
And I can tell you, like, when you're in high school, it was not like, oh, dude, I gotta have that Cadillac swag. No, you were not. I was not like rolling deep in the DeVille, like doing that.
Funny.
But now my wife has a Cadillac,
Right.
But they're actually like cool. Or you
What
look
does
at
she
the
drive?
Escalade, the XC5 or
XC5. All right, I'm rolling the XC4.
Okay, there we go.
Shout out.
Yeah, shout out. Yeah, they have an XT6 that just came out. It's like longer. I
Yeah,
haven't
it's
seen
sexy.
it yet.
No,
Yeah.
but that's interesting, right? And that builds off of this theme that we have, like these blurred lines.
And see, we just gave Cadillac a plug. It's like without even trying.
Season 2, anyone? No, I'm just kidding. Deborah Wall, just kidding. So these blurred lines, man. We're just living in fun times, man.
Yeah.
And like one thing I knew for sure, I didn't know if I would have an ounce of success, but I knew for sure that I couldn't sit around and be just a consumer. Like
Right.
I love consuming my peers' shit.
Right.
Like that's my favorite thing. I love, watching my peers do their thing and, big up in them and just congratulating. But I knew for certain that I wouldn't sit around and not be a producer.
Right.
And so that question keeps me going, like, man, if all this change is going on, all this excitement, like, how could I
You
not
want to put
contribute?
your touch on it.
What's my touch going to
exactly.
be?
Not just consuming everybody else's
I just
stuff.
want to put a unique footprint on the game.
Right.
And I posted yesterday and I wrote, I was like, dude, I'm not playing for admiration. I'm playing to change the game.
Yeah.
I want to change the game.
Yeah.
I want the game to be a little bit different because I stepped in and did my thing.
Yeah. No, and I think that's what truly drives you, and leaving that legacy behind as opposed to just being an active, hey, I got a ton of money and I can buy the fancy cars or whatever shoes I want. I mean, that's all great. Everybody likes nice stuff, but it's like, what's more than that outside of the material items that exist?
Exactly.
So when I look at businesses and, everyone's trying to look for funding, for their idea, not to say everybody deserves it by all means, because a lot of people are they think that, capital is too easy to get in a lot of ways, I think right now.
Yep.
Definitely going to be a problem in fairly short order. But
I agree.
With you've seen several different businesses, not even several, tons and tons of different businesses. What do you invest behind? Like, what do you look at? Is it the idea, the person? Is it a mixture of both? Like how if I'm looking for capital and I have a great idea, maybe even a great business, I just don't know how to scale it. Like, what do you look for in investments?
Yeah. So just to set some context here, different money behaves differently. And I've alluded to that in this conversation. We talked about different asset classes.
Right.
That's one thing I had to become familiar with.
Oh, yeah.
You can't expect banks are not, they're not risk prone. No. They're risk averse. They won't fund your shit even when you're making money.
Yeah.
So you go to them for a different thing. You go to private equity for a different thing. And eventually once you learn what you go to venture for, venture is this very specific animal where we're looking to fund businesses that could potentially gobble market share on the macro, on the whole. And 2019 is a really interesting year because it's been the year of IPOs.
Right.
Slack, Zoom,
Uber,
WeWork, Uber, Lyft. I mean, there's a lot of people getting rich.
Yeah.
But all these companies were started less than 10 years ago.
Right.
And they were funded with a very specific kind of money, and that's venture. And venture is patient money. Venture is money that knows that you're going to be in it for a little while. And if there's any upside at all, it comes down the road. So with that said, and if you believe that your business is specifically well equipped to thrive within that venture framework, then one thing that we're looking at now, and our preferences and criteria changes, but one thing we look for, you hear a lot about product market fit.
Right.
We look for founder product fit.
Okay.
Like, are you specifically like the right person for this?
Right.
Like, if any one of these guys and gals here went on to start a media company, I might consider backing them.
Right.
Because they have that DNA.
Yeah.
And it's like,
in their
okay,
background
this makes sense to me. Right. And it's like, I'm not necessarily like looking for the sexiest industry. And yeah, we all get FOMO, like blockchain, Bitcoin's back up again, 10K plus. I'm like, fuck, I should
have went when it was down. Yeah.
And some guy actually emailed me. He was like,
Hindsight's
remember when I told you to buy
2020,
Bitcoin, you dick? But he didn't say that when Bitcoin was down.
Of course, they never do.
We're not looking for like, what's popping right now. We look a lot for who's specifically well equipped. And then we overlay that with these macro themes. We believe that what's not going to change in the next 10 years is more important than what is.
Right.
That gives you
makes sense.
Some sense of
it's an interesting spin on it. What's not going to change? We know what's going to change.
Right. So what's not going to change, and what are some problems that we can solve around that? So that's what we do, man.
So is there something that you see that, maybe a little secret sauce of what John thinks is not going to change?
Well, I think the rate of disruption in media is not going to change.
Right.
I think right now there's a bunch of shit that I think about. Like there's millions of baby boomers heading to be elderly.
Yeah.
I think about that a lot.
Yeah.
Cause that's something
real.
that we're all going to have to deal with, like taking care of our parents and while taking care of ourselves. So that's kind of an interesting thing that's unique to our generation because of the way, millennials have come up. Also, student loans, $1.3 trillion of student loan debt.
FUCK.
That's a major problem.
Massive.
That could like prohibit the nation from blossoming at its full potential. So that's, a big problem.
I think that one specifically could, completely derail the progression of our nation simply because, unless there's a long-term fix put in place, I mean, you're stifling the growth of generations.
Yep.
And to recover from that, I mean, it could take decades. Like shit doesn't bounce back when you have $200,000 in debt and that you default on it, and all of a sudden you can't get a loan for a business,
and
let alone a car,
and it still doesn't go away.
And it's bankrupt. It's still following you around.
It's tough.
It's like a bad STD. But there's
that's the kind of stuff that I'm looking at, big macro themes like that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you on that. So John, a very exciting time for you. New show, on Viceland. Another plug. What's the deal with the show?
The show.
How did it come about?
Super simple, man. There's a gal out of LA, super seasoned TV exec. She actually created Pimp My Ride. So that's how she got on the mat on MTV.
Exhibit.
And and this is X to the Z Exhibit.
X.
I'm about to pimp your ride.
I'm gonna pimp your ride.
She made fantastic TV. I was watching her stuff before I even knew her, Beth Greenwald, and she came up with some homies out in LA. Those two homies, follow me here. Those two homies moved to the East Coast. On the East Coast, there are less networks, so TV talent typically lands with personal brands.
Okay.
So one of them landed at Marcus Samuelson's camp, who runs the business operations here, and then the other one landed at Alicia Keys' camp. So now Beth Greenwald, being the brilliant, producer that she is, she observes that there's this trend around celebrities and entrepreneurship.
Right.
LeBron did Cleveland Hustle, and there's a bunch of little things popping up. So she's like, what can we make happen here? So she ends up finding me. She reaches out to Marcus's camp. She types in, and this is what's really relevant of Vayner talent here. She types in Harlem Entrepreneur, and if you go home and you type in Harlem Entrepreneur, that's my page.
Thing.
Yeah,
that's you. That's John Henry.
And so I think about that because I'm like, damn, what if I just wouldn't have come up?
Yeah.
Because she typed it in, she found me. She asked Marcus if she knew me. He said, yeah. And then we kind of all plugged in. And so that was the inception. We, created the concept. We took it to market. We shopped it around. Vices immediately was very interested. They bought the pilot. And after which they ended up greenlighting the series, and we shot the series. And, it was a product of a lifetime to shoot. Probably my favorite part is that my brother, who's done all my vlogs for years, got to work on set with me.
That's
so he was
awesome.
on production, and
But
now he
those
doesn't
are like
even do my
memories,
vlogs
but that's
anymore.
like
He just
memories
does
that
TV.
you can't take, like being able to hustle with your brother like that.
Totally. We hustle on a show called Hustle
I mean,
with
this
my
guy's
brother.
got everything. I didn't even know. Teeing him up. It's like softball here.
Right. So that was a lot of fun. And honestly, like, yeah, man.
So what's the show about?
The show it's like The Prophet, except it's like a more culturally relevant version of The Prophet. No offense, Marcus Lemonis, but I go around to different businesses and I help them grow their
Spin
shit.
Studio.
Yes. Did you see that episode?
Yeah. So I've had to
Okay,
consume some content, man.
So yeah, I go to like these little businesses. We were adamant about it not being tech businesses,
Right.
Just like any kind of business. We work with a jam maker, donut makers, apparel companies, distilleries, shit like that. Really a lot of fun, man.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to put in a lot of work, front load it into a project like that, and then
Wait.
it goes out.
Yeah.
And you never know who's watching it, but to get love and daps from folks who are like, yo, I watched this with my kids, or I watched this with my dad, or whatever, is really humbling.
Yeah, it's very empowering.
It makes it worth it, man. It's really cool.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So was there, out of that show, how many episodes was the first season?
It was 8 episode season 1.
Okay. So was there a common theme you saw within all these businesses that you help?
Oh man, it's that people are really trying to go for it now.
Yeah, really?
People are shelving what they think, what historically has been considered safe.
Yeah.
And giving it an honest shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great, though.
And people come from different starting points. You work with some entrepreneurs that are privileged to have access to not even necessarily money, but even just like know-how.
Right.
That's huge. That's all of it.
Yeah.
And you have some folks who start from scratch and still muscle their way through. And I just love this game. And anyone who's crazy enough to go out there and give this shit a shot, like, that's my
respect.
kind of person.
Like
Yeah.
success or failure. It's like, at least you went up there and you tried.
Yeah.
You're not going to look back and be like, well, I wish one day, like maybe I should have or could have. You're 80 years old looking
We
back
did it,
and
man.
like, but you did it.
Yeah.
So Harlem, I'm in the travel industry. We send hundreds of thousands of people to New York City. People are now always looking for the new thing, something different, a new experience. Harlem's up and coming. We've been saying that, or maybe it's just getting more of a spotlight. I don't think that, I think the soul has always been here and been the same, but why should tourists come up to Harlem?
I mean, look, I'm not gonna do a tourist pitch, but I'll tell you why Harlem is special to me. Right. It's like, to me, this just, first of all, New York City is my favorite place in the world. And in New York, you kind of got to find what's that neighborhood that speaks to you. Right. And I remember before I moved to New York, I mentioned I was from here, but I moved away for a little while. I would stay up late, man, and read Malcolm X's autobiography. And I would, listen to jazz records. And man, this place was bursting with so much history. Right. We're literally on Malcolm X Boulevard and Martin Luther King Jr. in the street. So we're at where Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. intersected. And, across the way, when Fidel Castro came to visit, New York, he stayed uptown, just a block away on 124th. And you have Langston Hughes that used to live right there, Maya Angelou.
I mean, we're in a speakeasy.
Oh, we're in a speakeasy. And it's just the history here is so deeply fascinating to me. And to think that I could potentially play a role in contributing to a neighborhood that already has contributed so much to the world, that was something that I couldn't pass up. And if you think about it, Harlem is just a neighborhood. Right. And yet it's known worldwide. Yeah. So you tell me a neighborhood, when I went to Amsterdam, they don't know Murray Hill. Yeah, unfortunately, it's
not.
Considered a nicer area, but they know Harlem. Yeah, and they know Manhattan, whatever. So the brand equity here is really rich, and I wanted to contribute. Well,
are there restaurants you recommend? I mean, obviously New York City as a whole is just a big food city. I mean, it's a melting pot of different types of cultures, and you can get any type of food anywhere.
I recommend, the Rooster where we're at now. Marcus runs a world-class operation. I also recommend a smaller joint called The Edge, run by two sisters that make banging ass, Jamaican / UK food,
Right.
like a mixture. It's really cool. There's also like some unsuspecting joints that like you just wouldn't think to go into, and they, you know, fucking blow you away. Like there's a fish market next to the African market. There's a lot of markets here.
Yeah.
So there's a market next to the market.
Yeah, the market next to the market.
Just walk down 116th Street, Little Senegal.
Yeah.
Amy Roots for some chicken and waffles, Melba's, you know, and all these folks have become my friends.
Yeah.
So I don't see the restaurants, I see the faces behind the restaurants.
Yeah, which is actually even more empowering, you know, just to see them, and then they actually just deliver a great, unique product.
Totally.
You know, here. How about shopping wise? Is there any like different type of shopping?
We
you
have
get up here
suffered a
instead
little
of-
bit on the commercial strip, which is a shame because we brought so much fashion to the world.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I thought that there may be some.
Yeah, I think the biggest one right now is actually Dapper Dan, whom we celebrated in this very room some few odd months ago. I'll make his very long story short. He was a famous, you know, streetwear designer who in the 80s like dressed all the, you know, mob and the kingpins and all the gangsters and stuff like that.
Wow.
And he would actually take Gucci designs and mix them with different things. And
So
in
he was the one that got in
90s,
trouble for it. He ended up getting in
Gucci
trouble.
shut him down.
Yeah, he got in
'cause
trouble.
they're
I
like,
remember
"Yo,"
who
and
he
they
was.
shut him down. Damn near went bankrupt, out of business, whatever. You would catch him every day still on 122nd and Lenox, dressed super dapper. That's why I call him
Yeah,
Dapper Dan.
Dapper Dan.
And then Steve Stout, whom was Nas's business person, shout out Nas, about to go meet with Mass Appeal right after this. Steve Stout, who's a master like deal cutter in the culture, waited until someone at Gucci stepped into a role that had enough power to make a deal happen, but also had enough context to know about Dapper Dan.
Yeah.
And when Steve Stout was like, dude, we gotta do something by this. And they made a collection. And I'm not talking about like they made a shirt, like they made a collection.
It's actually some fly stuff.
And
It's
like
not-
there's a feature film on Dap now. There's like a show coming out. Like he's selling out, you know, talks, and like, you know, now in his old age, he's getting the respect and the homage that he deserves. And you know,
Can you imagine the patience on that and how frustrating it must be? Like you're just trying to create dope shit. Then you have Gucci coming, shutting you down. I mean, I remember Mike Tyson. He created stuff for Mike Tyson during
Everyone,
Iron
bro.
Mike's like heyday. I mean, he had some
Dude.
awesome stuff, and then it's just like, and then now it's like you pop back up and you're culturally relevant again.
bro,
I mean,
now
it's crazy.
He's on every song. Like
Yeah.
that's a good point, man. Talk about patience.
Yeah. I mean, that's
The ultimate long tail.
Well, you know, I appreciate your time. This
Thanks,
has been
dude.
very enlightening. You know, congrats on all your success.
Thank you, my friend.
Like you truly are making a difference and putting your little imprint on this world. And you know, glad to be able to connect with you, meet you, and excited to see what you do. You know, from an investment side and become
dude.
a finance mogul as well.
Thanks,
you know,
man.
so-
Thanks for kicking it with me and coming up to Harlem.
Yeah, definitely.
And I look
Thanks,
forward to
brother.
catching you in your hood.
Yeah, thanks, brother.
Peace.
Peace.